Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Ukraine has been plunged into fresh political turmoil after the resignation of Andriy Yermak, President Zelensky's powerful chief of staff and lead negotiator in US-backed peace talks. His departure followed an anti-corruption raid on his home, part of a sweeping probe into alleged multi-million-dollar kickback schemes. The move comes at a critical moment as Washington increases pressure for a negotiated settlement and Russia signals its own terms. With diplomacy, corruption and battlefield realities converging, pressure on Zelensky is intensifying. Joining us is Olena Lennon, adjunct professor of national security at the University of New Haven. Professor, welcome back to TVP World. Thank you for taking time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So Andriy Yermak's resignation has implications both within Ukraine and externally. Let's start internally first. What does it mean for the stability of the Ukrainian government?
Well, as paradoxically as it may sound, while it does signal some instability and turbulence in internal politics, in the long term, it's actually a very positive development and one that most Ukrainians welcome. And in fact, many people in Ukraine consider this a long overdue decision. Yermak is notorious for his monopolization on power and corruption schemes, and a lot of people have been calling for his resignation for a while now, and not just opposition, but civil society and various other actors. So he is, I wouldn't say that he is a well-liked figure, and he's been considered as a gatekeeper and as a second in charge in Ukraine, definitely overstepping a lot of his boundaries. So overall, in the long term, it is a positive dynamic and one that I think is going to actually contribute to political stability in Ukraine and will increase Zelensky's credibility in the eyes of international partners and domestic actors as well.
Okay, I want to talk about credibility in just a second. But you said it's a long time coming, so his reputation has been around a while. How did President Zelensky allow him to get so close to him? And to his office, and involve him in international engagements and so on. I mean, surely he would have been concerned about that reputation rubbing off on his government, wouldn't he?
Absolutely. Yermak is not just his chief of staff. He is a friend. He's a business partner, and he has earned loyalty and trust. So I think it also very much in line with Zelensky's leadership style. Zelensky has surrounded himself with his former business associates from the entertainment industry. That is, in fact, that's the style of governance that Zelensky has brought into the country, and that one that earned him a lot of criticism for monopolizing power and surrounding himself with loyalists. So Yermak is one of those loyalists, and I think he is a keeper of many secrets. And that might be one of many reasons why he has been around for so long, and why Zelensky has hesitated to dismiss him. So it does cast a shadow over on Zelensky himself. But I think dismissing him was absolutely the right move, and a lot more questions would have been raised if Zelensky resisted removing Yermak, because I think that would have undermined his reputation a lot more than all the risks associated with letting him go.
Right, so better now than never. But who's going to step into his shoes?
It remains to be seen. There are some rumors about the former ambassador to the U.S., Markarova, who might step into that role. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but the candidates that I have seen, again, circulating in the unofficial channels all suggest that it will be somebody very competent and a person who has earned respect and credibility, specifically among international partners at a time when negotiations are ongoing.
Okay, now in terms of zooming out a little bit, overall, in terms of Zelensky's government, how would you assess its stability and popular confidence in that government?
Well, it has been a very difficult time and a lot of turbulence with all the corruption schemes and corruption scandals unraveling at the same time, especially in the energy sector with Energoatom and Timur Mindich implicated in some of those corruptions, one of the largest embezzlement schemes since 2022. So given ongoing persistent airstrikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, obviously, any corruption, especially in the energy sector, was not received very well and generated a lot of discontent and backlash internally. So it has been a turbulent time, but like I said, so far, the Zelensky administration has responded adequately because they've cooperated with anti-corruption investigative services. And I have to say, that also shows that Ukraine's anti-corruption infrastructure that was put in place after the Maidan Revolution works. Those institutions are doing their job.
Well, yes, but there was a time when President Zelensky was rolling back their powers. But moving on from that, what about Yermak's role in the negotiations, the so-called peace negotiations? They're probably a ceasefire negotiation at this stage. How is his removal going to affect those talks?
I think initially it might create some instability and discontinuity and some turbulence, but in the long term, I think it's a good thing that he has been removed from the peace process because he has a track record of being implicated in corruption schemes and also one that is potentially more focused on preserving power than genuinely moving toward a resolution that could work for Ukraine. So I think it's a positive dynamic because it's new energy, new blood will be injected into this process that I think will generate more credibility and more trust from the international partners that Ukraine is represented by by an official who doesn't have that toxic track record.
Well, that I'm sure is true, Professor Lennon. But here are the facts. I mean, here we are moving along. I mean, the noises coming from the US are that things are kind of we are reaching some kind of compromised agreement, and this is the worst possible time for one of the key players in the Ukrainian negotiating team to be removed. So what impact might this have, even if it's only in the short term, on the negotiations?
Like I said, I still think that it is a positive dynamic because negotiations right now, we don't know. I'm skeptical that negotiations even offer that much promise because even given yesterday's attack on Kyiv, one of the largest aerial bombardments of Kyiv, shows that Russia is keen on maintaining escalation advantage, that they are committed to their maximalist goals, and that they're not willing to concede on most of the points in the proposed peace plan, even if the reduced version of it, the 19-point plan, which we haven't seen yet. So I don't think that negotiations are at a point where there's some realistic potential, and most likely the Russians are going to blame Ukraine for impeding the process. But I have to say that, in Russia's attack on Ukraine yesterday showed that the most threatening aspect of Ukraine's democracy to Russia is precisely its anti-corruption institutions. The Russians are threatened by Ukraine's democracy, and I think that yesterday's attack was just another indication of how committed Russia is to destroying Ukraine's democracy and its current administration. So, like I said, I'm still in the long term, all things considered. I think that replacement of Yermak will be a positive development in the negotiation process and domestically as well.
Understood. Now, staying with the corruption, I mean, the EU has been extremely supportive of Ukraine throughout the process, including starting discussions on Ukrainian accession to the bloc. What impact, if any, do you believe these corruption investigations are going to have on Ukraine's accession to the EU?
I think the EU accession is that one area where it is 100% a positive development, because it shows Ukraine's not just verbal and formal commitment to democracy reforms and anti-corruption reforms, but it shows that those institutions work and that Ukraine is worth investing into, and that it's a rule of law matters, and it's a trusted partner. So, and I actually think that the EU accession, again, is one of the more promising areas, because it's also one of the points in the original proposed peace plan on which the Russians could potentially agree. That could offer some, short-term focus in terms of selecting items in these peace proposals that could actually be executable realistically. And Ukraine's EU accession is a development, is a future that the Russians could accept as a trade-off, as a concession that could be tolerable to Russia. So I think that focus on democracy reforms and anti-corruption is absolutely well-timed and well-executed right now, as it could accelerate, hopefully, a ceasefire agreement that could hold in the near future.
In the last minute or so that we have left, Professor, tell me, how do you see the stage of peace talks? How realistic is it to expect some kind of ceasefire in the next few weeks?
Well, again, yesterday's attacks on Kyiv and across Ukraine showed that the Russians are committed to their maximalist objectives, and they're not willing to concede on any points. That said, the momentum is good. The fact that the Europeans, Ukrainians, and Americans are all talking, and there's pressure being applied on Europeans and on Americans and on the Russians, hopefully as well. I think the Ukrainians and Europeans have to, regardless of how good the prospects are, take advantage of this momentum and focus on the short-term objectives, such as the ceasefire, return of prisoners.
Yes, but is Russia going to come on board?
Well, it remains to be seen. I think if the U.S. puts pressure on Russia with more sanctions and other sources of leverage, then it could. We'll see what happens between the meeting between Witkoff and Putin next week. But I think there's still some pressure that can be applied on Russia that will force it to cave on at least some negotiable points of the peace plan.
Although Putin is still going for the maximalist demands of territory and so on. Unfortunately, Professor Lennon, we're going to have to end it there, but thank you as always for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, there are lots more coming up. Goodbye.